several other mostly exegetic writings. It is interesting to explore the reasons why an illustrious man attracted the attention of Serbian theologians. What do we know about this work? In his letter 47 to Desiderius, Jerome says that he has written a book on illustrious men from apostles to his own time, after the examples of Trumpus and Apollonius the Greek, emphasizing that he put himself down on the last page as one born out of pure time and the least of all Christians. According to Sanders, through this work, Jerome showed himself to be a pioneer in theological literature. On the other hand, Sidoro's view was that in the broadest and most fundamental context, Jerome borrowed much from Eusebius of Caesarea, not always with adequate references and with a fair number of mistakes, although these tended to decline substantially when he wrote of 4th century church fathers and authors where he was quite independent. According to Bishop Atanasi Jeftić, who as a patristic professor specialized in Jerome in Serbia, despite the above-mentioned quite evident mistakes, Jerome's patrological tractate is nevertheless highly, perhaps decisively significant, holding a prominent place in the general history of Christian literature, with its multitude of valuable testimonies. Indeed, the importance of his work is testified by the fact that almost a millennium later it served as a model for a number of similar works by medieval authors. Bishop Athanasius' teaching regarding St. Jerome has guided the work of younger generation of theologians and Christian historians, resulting in, among other things, several translations of an illustrious man into Serbian. Professor Marić was the first Serbian theologist in the second half of the 20th century who wrote about Jerome in his foreword to Rules of Pahorius the Great, 1957. He was followed by Dimitrije Bogdanović, who has several texts published in the Herald Church magazine in 1970, 78 and 72, as well as in the Patrological Handbook, Holy Fathers and Teachers of the Church, offered concise patrological materials on the life of St. Jerome, drawing mainly from the Western Christian historians. Miroslav Mirković, Professor Emeritus of History at the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Philosophy, produces the first serious work dealing with Jerome's life and works. Her book, Life and Correspondence of St. Jerome, is divided into two parts. The first, which is also the author's doctoral dissertation, between pages 11 and 97, is devoted to Jerome's life, while the second, pages 201 to 430, comprise translation of 26 of his letters and 7 letters written to him. However, the book has been deemed unreliable in both the historical, biographical, and translation sense. The author provides a good account of general history of the 4th century, but is chaotic in her approach to church history and uncritical in her use of certain unreliable Western historians. The pronunciation of Greek words is wrong, and it is also evident that the author is insufficiently versed in biblical and theological terminology. The inadequacy of her translation is especially evident on the example of letters 15 and 16 to Pope Damasus I, which, as Bishop Athanasius conceded in his critic, are difficult enough as it is, both in terms of content and language. In his work Narrative Sources for the History of Europe, Miloš Antolović, professor of general history at the University of Belgrade Faculty of Philosophy, writes about Jerome's life on basis of general historical data from Miroslava Mirković's work, among their things placing Stridon near Aquileia and criticizing Jerome for his exaggeration when describing the fall of Rome. According to Professor Antolović, Jerome was a product of his own life circumstances. His most important work, which launched him into prominence, was the continuation of the Chronicle of Eusebius, which brought the ecclesiastical history of Eusebius of Caesarea back from oblivion. Jerome translated Eusebius' history into Latin and then went on cover the period up to year 378. In Professor Antonović's estimation, On an Illustrious Man was Jerome's second most important work. Bishop Atanasi Jeftić published a translation of his work in 2001 with a short introduction. Slobodan Prodić translated On an Illustrious Man into Serbian from Russian translation in 2007, while Radovan Filipović translated it from the original Latin, first publishing in the theological scholarly periodical Theology of Vase in 2011, and then as a complete translation as part of a book issued in 2017 within the Christian Sources Library, Volume 3, published by Christian Cultural Center in Belgrade. Accompanying the translation was a study, St. Jerome, of Stridon and historical context of the work On an Illustrious Man, in which special attention was devoted to a critical analysis of the historical moment in which the work came about. The 12-volume edition the Holy Fathers translated into Serbian also includes the Jerome On an Illustrious Man, Volume 6, a Latin to Serbian translation presented as a parallel text with critical commentary ably and accurately performed by Dušica Petrović. This is preceded by an introduction by Radomir Popović, professor of Church History at Faculty of Orthodox Theology in Belgrade, entitled Eusebius Jerome, Brief Biography and Theology, in which it deals with theological historical context of both Jerome's life and the origins of work itself. Popović points out that the Church Fathers refer to Jerome as Dalmatian and that his place of birth was either Bosansko Grahovo or Bosanska Kostajnica, present day Bosnia and Herzegovina. Popović draws on 19th and 20th century Russian patrologists Smirnov, Popov, Lomparev and Disperov for the reminder of Jerome's biographical data. He also gives an account of Jerome's participation in Origen's controversies, as well as a condemnation of some Origen's views, which criticizing Jerome for arguing that everyone would be saved except for the devil. There is also an analysis of Jerome's transmission of Eastern monastic experience to the West and his activity in suppressing anti-monastic tendencies in the West propagated by certain individuals. Another aspect of Jerome's theological activity lay in the battle against Pelagius and Pelagianism, as well as in his stance regarding grace. At the end of the study, Popović provides an overview of Jerome's historical works. In the fourth volume of his massive patrology, Bishop Atanasi Jeftić, and former professor of patrology at Faculty of Orthodox Theology in Belgrade, begins his analysis of Latin Church Fathers with St. Jerome's and comprehensive account of his life, mainly on basis of his writings and correspondence, as well as research by Cavallera, Fockin, Bolotto, Frey. This is followed by Athanasius' translation of on a illustrious man from the original Latin Life of St. Paul, the first element, Life on St. Hilarion, Life of Malchus, the captive monk, St. Jerome's introduction to his Latin translation of the Rose of Pahor, Epistle to Paulinus on the study of Holy Scriptures, and the letter on Paula's pilgrimage from Latin language. Athanasius also provides the translation of letter 15 and letter 16 to Pope Damasus, improving upon Miroslav Mirković's previously mentioned effort. Finally, Bishop Athanasius provides a comprehensive biography on Jerome, however, without mention of any translation into Serbian, despite the existence of the several mentioned here in this paper, giving the impression that he does not take them very seriously. Bishop Athanasius draws his biographical data from Cavallera's research, but nevertheless occasionally corrects him regarding Jerome's place of birth. Athanasius offers three possibilities. Skradin on Krka river near Šibenik, the present-day Grahovo on Una river, on the border between Dalmatia and Pannonia, or a town more north towards Ljubljana on the Sava river. This one is the least probable, however, because it is not part of Dalmatia, as he said. In addition to providing some details from Jerome's youth, Athanasius Jeftić mentioned Jerome's involvement in the affair of St. John Chrysostom's slander and persecution, but also writes of his ascetic life filled with travel, in course of which he wrote letters, visited many places, and engaged in various polemics. Bishop Athanasius concludes, an anachoretic life, nor one of prayerful quietude, but does not, despite his asceticism, despite the fact that although a priest, he did not serve the divine liturgy. Interestingly, on the subject of the relation between Jerome and Origen, Athanasius observes that Jerome probably emphasized that he used Origen hexapla and tetrapla, but that he ultimately condemned both Origen and his erstwhile friend Rufinus. In separate section, Bishop Athanasius writes on fallacies Jerome committed in chronicle and underlines historical inaccuracy and uncertainty. Professor Golubovich's translation of portion of Jerome commentary on Matthew from Russian was published in collection The Holy Fathers Interpret the Gospel in 2002. Shobot translation of Letter of Evangelus from Latin was published in 2010 in Theological Views. The Scholarly Journal of Holy Synod of Bishops of Serbian Orthodox Church. In conclusions of the paper, it can be said that interest of Serbian historians and theologians in St. Jerome had gradually grown over the past half century, culminating in the work of Bishop Athanasius Jeftić, 2019, which provides the most comprehensive analysis of Jerome's lives in context of turbulent 4th century in Serbian language. Using mostly Western writers as sources, Athanasius places Jerome's life in a broader theological historical context, clearly delineating Jerome's views against the background of his involvement in Origen's controversies and his role in the relationship between the East and the West in the second half of the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th century, as well as examining Jerome's contribution in the fields of biblical studies exegesis, patristic and church history. When it comes to translation of Jerome's work into Serbian, Athanasius' translation of On Illustrious Men stands out due to the original work importance in church history and patrology, as well as the general interest it attracted among the Serbian theological public, mainly due to the influence of Bishop Athanasius himself. Thank you for your attention.